So I have just the outline, and you notice it doesn't look exactly like my picture, and that's okay. It's not going to at this stage, so don't freak out if it's not looking right. I just got the outline. It's going to start looking realistic once we get the color in there, okay? So here's where I'm starting. Now I'm going to go ahead and start my shading. I like to start with shadows. So that means I'm finding all of my darkest spots. So like obviously under the hair, here's really dark. In between the lips is usually pretty dark. You know, nose hole, around the eyes. My eyebrows are darker. Wherever you see it very, very dark, I'm just going to go in and do those dark spots first. I'm using just this little guy that we used before. You can use a charcoal pencil, but I like to just start off big and messy. And then we'll go in and do some blending. While I'm doing this, I am looking at my reference at all times and checking where those shadows are. So I'm not just guessing. I'm trying to do this from observation. It's still from a picture, so it's not drawing from life, but I'm drawing from observation of my picture. So I'm checking where those shadows are and drawing them.
Look it like breeze.
Okay, this happens more than I'd like to admit, but my phone corrupted one of my video files, so we didn't see how I did my highlights. So let me explain that real quick. I stopped at that same spot before where I was pulling out or putting in my shadows, and then I just looked at wherever I see my brightest highlights. So under the cheek we see the brightest, under my neck there's some around my lips, there's usually a couple in the nose, and then also importantly the eyes. One note to make is that the eyes are round, they're not flat. So don't go in and do just one flat color of white. You can see I've got some shadow on the side of my eyes, again because they're a sphere. So I'm going to make sure I give it white just in the parts that are white and not just all the way across. That's going to help it look realistic. So I did that using an eraser. Went right into that gray that I already have. So I used both a big eraser for the big spots, see that? And then a little one on my pencil for the tiny detailed spots. I went through and just erased those spots. I'm basically drawing with my eraser. I'm drawing the highlights with my eraser, and I use a small one to pull those out. Now I want to go through, and since I don't need those grids anymore, I'm basically drawing all from sight now. I'm just going to come through and just kind of erase off all those extra little lines. I can do that like with my finger, which is usually just the most effective. I can use my napkin with a little bit more of that charcoal on it. That might be a little bit easier to blend it in. I just want to get those out of the way before I start really getting into my shading so that we don't have to do that at the very end. So now that I have my biggest highlights and my darkest shadows in, I'm going to go in and start doing kind of the nitty-gritty work. So looking at my reference here, you can see, so it's not just bright and very, very dark. You'll see these kind of middle values here where it's kind of a middle shade, and you'll see it slowly transitions from light to dark. So I want to do that on here. I already have that middle value because that's the color I started with. That's why we did that first base. It makes it so much easier. But now I just need to go more focused with my highlights. So like on here you can see there's a very sharp edge between the lip and the highlight. I want to make sure that's happening on here. I want to do a slow transition from the highlight to the face. So I'm going to go onto my face and use my blending stick or my Q-tip and rub it in between the dark and the light to give it more of an even transition. And then the eyes, I'm going to come in and draw just those more detailed dark spots to really bring that out. This is really going to start bringing it to life. So it's 3 basic steps: shadows, highlights, and then blending basically. So I'm going to do that in front of you guys, show you how it's done. I'm probably going to make it look easier than it is. I know it's not very easy, but the goal is just to look at where dark turns into light and then how quick it fades. So here it's really slow. It starts off dark and it slowly gets light, whereas here it's dark and all of a sudden it's light. So that's going to be a sharp edge. This will be a lot of blending. So I'm slowly making it from dark to light. So I am going to do that here, but my goal for you is just to try and find those blending transitions and give them a try. I don't care if it's not completely realistic, I'm just looking for your best effort.
Look at like breeze. Look at like breeze. Look at like
Alright, so we got our shading, our highlighting, and then you notice it took a lot of just going over the same spots, blending things in, and then adding more charcoal on top of them. It's really a lot about layering, and it takes a long time, but if you take the time to do those layers, it's worth the effort. It makes it look a lot more 3D. So we have one last step before we're finished. It's a very short step. So you have all your highlights, but you notice even with some hard erasing, there's some spots just can't get as bright as you're trying to go for. So like there's a little bit of highlights throughout this, just white spots that I didn't get very white on here. So I'm just going to use my white charcoal, and this is saved for the very, very end and only for the brightest spots. So I'm barely going to use this. Use it very sparingly. If you go through and use it everywhere now, it's going to kind of ruin all the shading you've done. So just on those brightest spots, I'm going to use this to give it that final kind of shine and 3D look. I'm going to go put those last highlights in, and then we are finished. So thanks for lending me your ear, and good luck with your portraits.
Yeah.